What happens when a senator's wife gets caught drunk driving, and then, in the middle of her court hearing, pulls out her cell phone and calls her husband for help? This 45-year-old woman is about to learn that some phone calls you can't make. Some positions don't grant immunity, and some husbands choose integrity over protection. But what makes this case truly unforgettable isn't just the drunk driving. It's what she hit, who she left injured, and what her husband said when Judge Caprio put him on speakerphone in front of the entire courtroom. The air in the Providence Municipal Courtroom was thick, heavy with the scent of old wood and quiet desperation. It was a place where 1,000 small human dramas had unfolded, but today felt different. A nervous energy crackled under the hum of the fluorescent lights. Everyone in the gallery seemed to be leaning forward just a little, their eyes fixed on the woman standing before the bench. Her name was Elizabeth Hanford, and she carried herself with a poise that seemed at odds with the scuffed linoleum floor and the utilitarian benches. She was well-dressed, her hair perfectly styled, a picture of quiet composure. But her hands, clasped tightly in front of her, betrayed her. They were clenched, the knuckles white with a pressure that spoke volumes. This wasn't just another traffic violation. Everyone knew it. The charge was drunk driving, and the whispers swirling around the room hinted at something more, something that made this case a potential powder keg. At the heart of it all was Judge Frank Caprio. He wasn't just a judge, he was an institution. Known for his compassion and his common sense approach, he had a way of cutting through the legal jargon to find the human truth at the center of every case. But today, his usual warm demeanor was tempered with a quiet seriousness. He looked over the paperwork, then back at Elizabeth. His voice, when he spoke, was calm but firm, a steady anchor in the tense room. "Ms. Hanford," he began, "you're here today, facing a serious charge. Operating a vehicle under the influence. How do you plead?" Elizabeth's voice was clear, though a slight tremor ran beneath the surface. "No contest, Your Honor." It was an admission, but not a surrender. There was a calculation in her eyes, a strategy being deployed. As the prosecutor outlined the facts of the case, the erratic driving, the failed field sobriety test, the breathalyzer reading that was well over the legal limit, Elizabeth's composure began to fray at the edges. She listened, but her gaze kept drifting to the large watch on her wrist, as if she were on a schedule, as if this were an inconvenient meeting she needed to wrap up. Then something shifted. The prosecutor mentioned the collateral damage. He called a name, and a man named Robert DeSouza made his way hesitantly to the stand. He was an older man, dressed in simple, worn clothes. He moved slowly, with a slight stoop to his shoulders. That spoke of a life of physical labor. He didn't look at the gallery or at Elizabeth. His eyes were fixed on the judge, as if he were the only source of reason in the room. Judge Caprio's tone softened. "Mr. DeSouza," he said, "can you tell the court what happened?" Robert's voice was rough, unpolished, but every word was weighted with a raw, undeniable truth. He explained that the car Elizabeth had sideswiped wasn't just a vehicle. It was their lifeline. His wife, he said, his voice catching for a moment, had severe kidney problems. She needed dialysis 3 times a week. The car was how they got there. It was how they got to the grocery store, to the pharmacy. It was their independence. Now, with the rear quarter panel smashed in and the axle damaged, it was undrivable. The insurance was fighting them on it. The repairs were going to cost thousands they simply did not have. "We're on a fixed income, Your Honor," he said, his hands trembling slightly as he held them out. A simple, helpless gesture. "We don't have thousands. My wife, she's scared. We don't know how we're going to manage the appointments now. We have to rely on neighbors, and it's a burden. On them and on us." The room was utterly silent. The abstract concept of property damage had just been given a face, a name, and a terrifying reality. It was in the wake of Robert's testimony that the atmosphere curdled. Elizabeth Hanford seemed to shrink for a moment under the weight of his words, but then a different kind of resolve hardened her features. The quiet, pleading wife vanished, replaced by a woman used to wielding influence. She turned to Judge Caprio, her voice taking on a new, sharper edge. "Your Honor," she interjected, "with all due respect, this is a complicated situation. There are factors at play. My husband, he's a United States Senator. He needs to be aware of these proceedings. He can provide context." A ripple of disbelief went through the courtroom. It was so brazen, so audacious, that for a second, no one seemed to breathe. She was playing the ultimate card, the card of power and connection, right here in a court of law, where the ideal is that everyone is equal. Judge Caprio leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. He steepled his fingers, his gaze fixed on Elizabeth. The silence stretched, becoming a physical presence in the room. You could feel the conflict brewing. Would the system bend? Would the invisible shield of political power deflect the course of justice here, in this ordinary courtroom? Finally, the judge spoke, his words measured, each one dropping into the quiet like a stone. "A senator, you say?" He paused, letting the title hang in the air. "Context is always important, Miss Hanford. But in this courtroom, the law is the ultimate context." He gestured to the court officer. "Let's get the senator on the phone. We'll put him on speaker. Let him provide this context for the entire court." The order was so unexpected, so utterly breathtaking in its directness, that a collective, sharp intake of breath came from the gallery. This wasn't going to be a quiet, backroom phone call. This was going to be public. This was going to be a confrontation no one could have predicted. The court officer handed Elizabeth a phone, the keypad beeping loudly in the dead silence as she dialed the number. Each tone was a countdown to the unknown. The phone began to ring, the sound tinny and unnervingly loud over the speaker system. 1 ring, 2 rings. The entire world in that courtroom seemed to have narrowed to that electronic pulsing sound, everyone waiting, wondering what voice would answer and what it would say when it did. The tension was a wire pulled taut, ready to snap. The phone rang a 3rd time, the sound echoing in the profound silence. Every person in the courtroom was frozen, a collection of statues, all oriented toward the small, black speaker on the judge's bench. Elizabeth Hanford held the receiver, her earlier confidence now seeming brittle, a thin veneer over a deep and sudden terror. She had wanted her husband's influence, his power, to enter the room as an invisible force that would bend the proceedings in her favor. She had not expected Judge Caprio to rip open the curtain and invite that power to sit in the front row for everyone to see. The 4th ring was cut short. There was a click, and then a voice, smooth, polished, and slightly impatient, filled the room. "Elizabeth, I'm in a briefing. What is it? Is everything all right?" It was the voice of a man used to being in control, a voice from the halls of Washington that now felt utterly alien in this humble Providence courtroom. Judge Caprio didn't wait for Elizabeth to form a reply. He leaned forward, his voice calm and preternaturally clear. "Senator, this is Chief Judge Frank Caprio of the Providence Municipal Court. You're on speakerphone in my courtroom." The silence that followed was even heavier than before. You could almost hear the mental gears shifting, the sudden jarring recalibration happening on the other end of the line. The senator's professional demeanor didn't crack, but the temperature of his voice dropped several degrees. "Judge Caprio," he said, the warmth completely gone, replaced by a cautious political neutrality. "To what do I owe this unexpected honor?" "Your wife is before me on a charge of driving under the influence," the judge stated, his words plain and unadorned. "She has entered a plea of no contest, We've just heard from the victim, a Mr. Robert DeSouza. His vehicle, which he and his wife rely on for her critical medical treatments, was severely damaged. The financial impact on them is significant." Judge Caprio paused, letting the stark reality of the situation settle in the air, a stark contrast to the world of political briefings. "Your wife indicated you could provide some context, so I'm giving you the opportunity to do so. The court is listening." Elizabeth found her voice, a rushed, panicked whisper into the phone. "John, it's a misunderstanding. This whole thing is being blown out of proportion. I just need..." She was trying to steer the conversation back to familiar territory, a private plea for a rescue, for the political intervention that had likely solved so many other problems in their lives. But the senator cut her off. His voice was firm, decisive. "Elizabeth, stop." The two words were like a door slamming shut. The gallery collectively held its breath. This was the moment. This was where the wire would either snap or go slack. "Judge Caprio," the senator continued, his tone now formal and resolute. "I appreciate you taking my call, but I have no context to provide. My wife was driving. She was charged with a crime. She has pled to that charge. I am a public servant who has taken an oath to uphold the law, not to subvert it for personal convenience." You could have heard a pin drop. Elizabeth's face went ashen. The blood drained from her features, leaving behind a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. It was a look of profound betrayal, the utter collapse of a world where connections and status were the ultimate currency. She had thrown him the lifeline, and he had not only refused to catch it, he had cut the rope. The senator's voice continued, unwavering. "What happens in your courtroom, Judge, is a matter of law and fact. It is not a matter of my opinion or my influence. My wife must be held accountable for her actions, just as any other citizen would be. The D'Souzas deserve justice, not a political maneuver." He paused, and for the first time, a sliver of personal emotion entered his voice. Not of anger, but of a weary disappointment. "Elizabeth, you need to accept the consequences of what you've done. I love you, but I will not be a party to this. I'm sorry." And with that, there was another soft click, followed by the dead hum of the dial tone. The connection was severed. The intervention was over. The shield had not just failed, it had actively turned against its wielder. The dial tone seemed to buzz for an eternity. Elizabeth Hanford stood completely still, her body rigid. The carefully constructed facade had not just cracked, it had vaporized. The poised political wife was gone, and in her place was just a woman, exposed and utterly alone, in a room full of strangers, facing the unyielding weight of her own poor choices. She slowly lowered the phone back into its cradle, her movements robotic, her eyes wide and unfocused, staring at nothing. Judge Caprio let the silence hang for a long moment, allowing the sheer, stunning impact of the conversation to settle on everyone present. He looked from Elizabeth's shattered expression to the weary, hopeful face of Robert DeSouza. The lesson had been delivered, not by the judge, but by the very person she had thought would save her. The principle had been affirmed in the most dramatic way imaginable. When he finally spoke, his voice was not triumphant, but deeply solemn. "Ms. Hanford," he said, "you have heard your husband, a man in a position of great power, reminding us all of a simple, fundamental truth, that no one is above the law. Not you, not me, not even a United States senator." He picked up his pen. "Your plea of no contest is accepted. The court finds you guilty of operating a vehicle under the influence." He then detailed the sentence: a suspended license, fines that were substantial but not crippling. Most importantly, and it was the point he stressed the most, she was ordered to pay restitution to Robert DeSouza in the full amount of the car repairs. to be paid within 30 days. "You will make this right, Ms. Hanford," Judge Caprio said, his gaze locking with hers. "You will undo the tangible harm you caused to this man and his wife. That is not a punishment. That is your responsibility." He also ordered her to complete a state-approved driving course and community service. It was a firm, fair sentence, one that prioritized accountability and restitution over pure punishment. It was justice, plain and simple, delivered without fear or favor. As the gavel fell, the courtroom seemed to exhale. The dramatic tension that had held everyone captive finally broke. Robert DeSouza's shoulders slumped, not in defeat, but in profound relief. A small, grateful tear traced a path through the wrinkles on his cheek. He had been heard. Elizabeth was led away by her attorney, her head bowed, the reality of her new circumstances finally, fully settling upon her. The spectacle was over. The powerful had been humbled, the vulnerable had been vindicated, and the law had proven itself, for one more day, to be blind to titles and wealth. This story, this incredible moment where a phone call on a speakerphone became a national lesson in integrity, is why we do what we do. It's a reminder that character is what you do when you think no one of consequence is watching, and that true strength isn't in wielding power, but in refusing to wield it unjustly. If you believe in seeing more moments of raw, unfiltered justice, where the playing field is leveled and everyone is held to the same standard, then do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because stories like this one, they don't happen every day, but when they do, you're going to want to be here to see them.